I'm also the District 9 City Councilor representing Alston Brighton. Today is Tuesday, May 3rd, and we are here with our great team from the Department of, I always mess this up, Technology, as part of our FY17 budget review. I'd like to remind folks that this hearing is being broadcast both on Comcast Channel 82 and Comcast Channel 8, RCN 82, and recorded for future viewing. I'd ask everyone in the chamber to silence any electronic devices. At the conclusion of the department's presentation and question and answer period from my colleagues, we will accept public testimony and would appreciate it if folks would sign up on our sign-up sheet by the front door, and that you state your name, any affiliation, and residence, and limit your comments to just a few minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns are heard. We'll take up to 10 people for online testimony via Google Hangouts at each hearing after in-person testimony. The link to sign up for online testimony is boston.gov/citycouncil/Google ASP. That's a new feature that we are trying to get underway. And I am joined in order of their arrival, Councilor at Large Anissa Sabi George to my right, to my left, Councilor Sal LaMartina, and to my right, Councilor Matt O'Malley. My good friend, Councilor Matt O'Malley. I will now read the dockets into the record. Dockets number 0525 through 0527, 0537, and 0543. Orders for the fiscal year 17 operating budget, including annual appropriation and tax order, annual appropriation for the school department, appropriation for other post-employment benefits, appropriation for certain park improvements, and appropriation for certain bridge projects. Dockets number 0528 through 0532, 0534 through 0542. Orders for the fiscal year 17 capital budget, including loan orders, appropriations, amending previous loan orders, and lease and purchase agreements. I'd like to welcome Jasha and your team from Do It, and I will hand it over to you for a presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. Good morning. I'm here today as the Chief Information Officer for the City of Boston, and I'm here to testify on behalf of Mayor Walsh's proposed fiscal year 2017 budget for the Department of Innovation and Technology, which may sometimes be referred to as Do It. Before I start, I'd like to introduce some of the members of my team who are here with me today. To my right is Patricia Boyle McKenna, the Chief of Staff for the department. Patricia is new to my department, but certainly not to the City of Boston. She's served in various roles, most recently in the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics, and I'm very happy to introduce her here today as a member of the Do It leadership team.
Welcome. And a friend and constituent as well.
Excellent. All the way to my left is Lauren Lockwood, our Chief Digital Officer. Lauren, who is here before you last year, runs the city's digital team. This is the group that's devoted to delivering constituent services, information, and engagement using the latest digital tools. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the projects that she and her team are undertaking. And also to my left is Eddie Pinkerton, our Director of Operations. Some of you may remember that he appeared before you last year in an acting capacity, and I'm very pleased to say that Eddie now serves as a permanent member of the leadership team in this role overseeing our finance and operations.
Congratulations.
I'll be happy to answer questions that you have, but before that, I'd like to briefly share some information about the mission of my department, some of our recent accomplishments, and the upcoming priorities that are reflected in this proposed budget. Our department provides technology services and support to every other department in the City of Boston. We also provide some digital services directly to constituents. We have 5 focus areas. The first is core infrastructure. We manage the networks, servers, data centers, phones, and desktop computers that are the backbone of the city's technology efforts. The second focus area is what we call tools for government. These are the application systems that the city uses to run its business, from the ERP and tax systems that manage the city's finances to the CRM systems that support our 311 service, and the permitting and licensing system that sits behind many of the customer transactions people experience. Our third focus area is on digital engagement and service delivery. We run the city's website, social media program, and many of our mobile applications. We aim to make information and services available via digital devices and deliver a friendly, convenient, and accessible experience. Our fourth focus area is data and analytics. We help our departments use data to improve quality of life and the effectiveness of government operations. We build dashboards, create analytical tools, and provide operational support to teams that want to incorporate data into their work. And our final area of focus is around broadband and digital equity. We work towards the goal of a city where every resident and business has access to affordable broadband internet and the opportunity to develop the skills that they need to succeed in the digital world. So given our broad portfolio of responsibilities, I won't go into all of the projects we've worked on over the past year. I will highlight a few of the major accomplishments. In January, we launched pilot.boston.gov. This is an early version of the new website for the City of Boston. We launched a pilot site to gather feedback from the community as we develop the full site, which will launch later this year. We aim to set the standard for city websites when it comes to design, accessibility, and user-friendliness. We've also officially launched permits.boston.gov. This site allows residents and businesses to apply for construction and other permits online. It offers a modern, friendly user experience and has many features to make the permitting process less painful. Since it was created last year, the citywide analytics team, part of my department, has grown to provide innovative data tools to many departments in the city. We've worked with the fire department to develop an interactive data map to keep firefighters safe in an emergency. We've created CityScore, the innovative dashboard system that makes information about our performance accessible to the mayor and members of the public. And we've worked with our transportation department to develop and test new strategies for traffic management and mitigation. We've increased speed and security on the network that supports city operations, and we've relocated many critical systems out of this building and into a more secure and resilient facility. We've negotiated an extension of the Comcast cable TV franchise, ushering in new discounts for senior citizens. And with support from the Public Works and the Law Department, we led the negotiation with Verizon that resulted in last month's announcement of a major fiber investment in the city of Boston. For the very first time, Boston consumers will have real choice when it comes to broadband and TV services. So there are many other projects we've worked on over the past year. A summary of these have been provided to the members of the council. As we look towards fiscal year 17, we are excited by what we can accomplish with this budget and with the support of the council. A few things to highlight. We will continue our efforts to modernize the city's technology infrastructure, making it more secure and resilient to disaster. In FY17, we expect to relocate additional server equipment out of the basement of City Hall and into a facility well outside the city of Boston to ensure that our city operations could continue in the face of a major disaster. We will replace the CRM system that powers BOSS 311 with a new, more flexible set of software that allows us to better track our interactions with constituents and provide a high-quality constituent service experience in more places. Over 50% of our constituent service requests are now made through digital channels, and we expect this number to continue to grow. We will continue the multi-year project of connecting every Boston public school to the city's fiber optic network. Every classroom should have the bandwidth that it needs to take advantage of digital learning opportunities, and we need to stay ahead of that demand. And lastly, we will continue to expand wicked-free Wi-Fi, covering more of the city's main streets districts and public spaces. We've seen record usage of our public Wi-Fi system over the past year, and we're eager to expand it to more parts of the city. These and many other projects are outlined in the proposed budget material. The Department of Innovation and Technology is here to help our government, our businesses, and our residents succeed. Good technology is part of the foundation of good government. And to meet the expectations of our constituents, we must use technology well inside of city government. I thank the Council for your continued support in these efforts, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, and we've been joined by District City Councilor Frank Baker. Josh, the allocation to the different programs of your budget has shifted. Could you speak to some of the priorities and why, for example, data and analytics has been reduced by over 50%, while core infrastructure has increased by 24. So obviously, you've reprioritized some of the programming. Maybe you could speak to that.
So there's a bit of reprioritization that's happened here, but actually most of this reflects a adjustment to the way we keep track of the different projects that we have. There's a memo that was put together. I'm not sure if this was provided to the council as part of our budget package, but we took the previous org structure of the department and the previous account codes that had been used, and we basically got rid of most of the existing ones and created a new set of account codes that accurately reflect the 5 focus areas that I talked about today. And so in doing that, we recategorized retroactively some of the accounts in order to align with this new accounting system. So what you're seeing in terms of that reallocation of funds, more than anything, simply reflects a more accurate accounting of where our money is being spent relative to these new set of accounts that are aligned with our 5 priority areas. Okay. Ultimately, we're continually evaluating the scope of the projects that we have in our personnel and contract investments, and we think that the FY17 budget sort of accurately reflects, more than anything, where we are today in terms of that alignment.
So is that a shift in personnel too? Does that account for a lot of the?
There have been a couple of very small personnel shifts, but for the most part, this is really an exercise in accurate categorization and making sure that we're accounting for people in the right bucket that reflects the work that they do today.
And could you speak to your FTEs, kind of a little bit of historical context leading to this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Give me 1 second just to get my numbers in front of me. So in terms of our actual headcount of hired individuals, the department has been relatively flat over the past few fiscal years. In FY13, we had 124 full-time employees. FY14, it was 122. And FY15 and 16, it's 127. We have seen the authorization in our budget for the headcount increase slightly over that same period, from 136 employees in FY13 to 149 in FY17. The increase in FY17 represents an increase. The proposed increase represents an increase of 5 over the previous year's budget, the FY16 budget. Of that, the vast bulk of those relate to the operation of BONET, which is the network that connects the various city buildings and facilities, schools, libraries, City Hall, 1010 Mass Ave, connects them to each other and to the internet. As we were able to secure an additional over $1 million a year in E-rate funding over the last year from the federal government, and a portion of that money is going to fund these 4 additional heads, which will be used to provide 24/7 support for the city's network. One of the challenges we've had of late is that although city government operates 24/7, the personnel who support this critical technology infrastructure do not. And this will allow us to provide that necessary support service all the time.
Great. And lastly, could you go over some of the newer capital projects that are part of this budget?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, quite a bit of our capital budget is connected to some of the larger multi-year capital projects that we've been undertaking. In particular, the CRM upgrade actually was started in the current fiscal year. The expansion of BONET to connect every school, some of the modifications to the upgrades to the tax collection system, and the website project that you heard a bit about. Those are all multi-year projects that continue with a great deal of funding for the upcoming years. Some of the new things that we have, we are investing in the radio facility on Bellevue Hill in West Roxbury, which is a critical location for a variety of public safety and municipal use radio systems. We'll be improving replacing the shed that holds equipment up there to allow us to take advantage of modern radio technology that requires a bit more of a sophisticated facility. That will be a value spread across our various public safety agencies. I mentioned in my opening remarks that we are establishing a location for critical server infrastructure located well outside the city limits of Boston, likely somewhere in central or western Mass. That is another big new initiative funded in this, and this is really about bringing the city closer towards industry's best practices when it comes to resilience in the face of disaster. We did move much of our primary equipment out of this building last year and into a more secure facility. That facility, however, is about a quarter of a mile away from this building, which, if you had a major flood or some other type of situation, is not an ideal scenario. So we'll be investing in setting up a presence in a commercial facility outside of the city.
Will that be an undisclosed location?
I think the location may end up being a matter of public record, but
Right.
it's we feel confident when we work with these vendors. We're working with commercial companies who invest a great deal in security and resiliency, both physical security as well as making sure there's redundant power, redundant connectivity, and frankly a level of security far in a way what we can do ourselves inside of a building, a municipal building like this one. We're also, we have some new capital dollars allocated to mobile devices for city employees. We've been working with various departments, in particular inspectional services and public works department, to better equip the workforce with tablets and other mobile devices to allow them to not have to be reliant on paper as they do their job. And this is something that there's been some amount of funding allocated to each year. In the last year, we were able to bring the construction inspection unit of Public Works online with mobile devices and several of the divisions within inspectional services. The additional capital funding provided this year will allow us to work with those departments and any others that are over-reliant on paper-based processes and help them to digitize that.
And just one final comment, because I know Councilor Asabi George is up against the clock. Tracking code enforcement tickets and such as that, is that in the pipeline eventually so folks, including our offices, can track those kinds of quality of life issues in the neighborhoods?
Yeah, we currently track these. So code enforcement violations are managed through a system that we have called Infor Public Sector, I believe is the name of the product. But and I believe we do publish many of those on the city's open data portal. But I'd be happy to speak with you about how we can make that data more useful for you and your constituent service efforts.
Appreciate it. And we've been joined by Councilor Tito Jackson as well. Councilor Asabi George.
And thank you all for being here today. As you may know, I chair the Committee on Homelessness, Mental Health, and Recovery, so many of my questions will be sort of in that realm. I believe that Do It is working with DND and Green River to build a coordinated access system for homeless individuals. Can you talk about that project, please?
Yes. Do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, alongside with the Department of Neighborhood Development, the Department of Innovation and Technology is working to implement a data warehouse called a coordinated access system through Green River to house all of the homelessness data in a more secure, larger server space here within the city of Boston.
I'll just add to that. Part of this is really addressing that question of, how do you help the various service agencies that support people struggling with homelessness in the city of Boston to get access to the housing opportunities that are available and to make sure that that access is done in such a way to make the best use of the limited available housing opportunities. For example, if somebody needs a kind of supportive housing situation, you want to make sure that that housing unit is going to the person who will get the most benefit for what is unique about that particular unit of housing. And so one of the goals of this project is to equip our city and city agencies and external partners with better access to the information that they need to correctly align people with housing units.
That's great. No, I'm very excited about it. And I'm also excited to learn the ways that Do It with in D&D and this program at Green River, the work with Green River, can partner with BPS to notify schools and classroom teachers right down to sort of that that daily contact piece with teachers that have students that are homeless, and how we can use this technology or the pending technology to really connect our kids, in particular our homeless kids that are part of homeless families, with their teachers and other resources. So I'm wondering if that conversation, or if there's any ability to converse with BPS to loop them in on this service.
So we've started very early conversations in regards to how we can better support both BPS as they tackle the massive homelessness issue that they're undertaking, and to see if the coordinated access system is the right method to do that.
Right. It may not be, but I'm happy to hear that that conversation is starting at least, and that we may be connected. There's also, I know, some work to use data analytics to predict individuals who are likely to overdose. I'm curious as to how you'll use existing data to get to that point, and I guess I'd appreciate a better understanding of how that can work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll say this is a very early stage project. It would be probably closest to a sort of investigation, a research investigation, than an actual product that we are prepared to put into the field. The goal of this project is to recognize the fact that we have limited resources available for addressing the terrible opioid crisis that is facing our city and our state, and to ask ourselves the question of, can we use data to better direct those resources to the people for whom they can have the biggest benefit? And so from that frame, what we are investigating is whether data gained from the EMS system, when somebody is transported by EMS for a narcotics-related incident, whether we can develop what would be called a predictive model that when somebody comes into that system, we can identify a score of how likely they are to be back in an ambulance in the year ahead. And from that, help to target addiction and recovery services to the people who have the highest likelihood of having a repeat narcotics-related incident. That's the hypothesis that we're exploring right now. So we're in the very early stages of working with our EMS service to analyze data and to see if that's something that we can do. If we're able to do that, there's a series of steps and questions around how we put that into operation, working with the Mayor's Office of Recovery Services and other providers who may have access to resources that can assist people. These kinds of projects are, I think, representative of the incredible potential of data and analytics, but they also touch directly on some of the risks and challenges. We're talking about highly protected medical data, and we're talking about people who are, in a kind of vulnerable stage, and in a point where we have to make sure that whatever interventions are made are made in a way that is truly beneficial and respectful of the people involved. And so this is an exploratory project for us, but it's what we are here to do when it comes to this kind of data and analytics work, is to help our city departments take on the biggest challenges facing the city and its residents.
Well, it's certainly exciting and impressive. I think a lot of us, many of us, when we think about technology and technological advances, we don't really see those bigger connections to some of the social issues that we deal with as a city. And one ask of you guys, as you expand your fiber optic network into more Boston Public Schools, I think that's great, and I'll celebrate that. Is there a way to look that we expand this into some of our homeless shelters? Because one of the greatest deficits many of our homeless feel or experience is a lack of connectivity, and technology can provide that for us and access to the internet?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Ann Schwieger, who we recently hired as the city's first broadband and digital equity advocate, asked that very same question and is speaking with some of our shelter providers about how we could help with that. We've actually had some conversations with the folks from the New England Center and Home for Veterans on the other side of City Hall Plaza that came out of a recognition that wicked-free Wi-Fi was being used extensively by the veterans who stay in that facility during the day when they were out on the plaza. And that led them, as part of their renovation project, to create a Wi-Fi cafe area for their guests to be able to get online and stay connected even when they're in that facility. So it's something we're really excited to explore with the many great shelter providers throughout the city, and hopefully we can be a part of helping them get connectivity for their residents.
Great, you've got my support in that. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you, Chair, I'm all set.
Thank you. And before I recognize Sal Amatina, I just wanted to acknowledge the service desk and your team that helps us with all our information technology needs. Great staff up there. So
Thank you
I just
very
want to recognize them. Councilor Amatina.
I was just ready to say. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome, and thank you all for the work that you're doing. I did want to talk a little about some of your apps and how they're working. But first, before I do that, the Boston 311.
Yeah.
So do we have numbers before and like a year later, you must have numbers. Are more people using the 311? Because I still use the 4500.
Yeah.
So what is going on with that and how is that working?
Absolutely. So I don't have numbers at my fingertips about usage of people dialing 311 versus 4500, but generally what we've seen is that phone calls have been relatively flat since the official launch of 311.
Why has it been flat?
Because we're seeing more usage on digital channels.
Okay.
So we've seen an overall growth in service requests, but increasingly the percentage is now, for the first time, majority of those requests as of this year are coming in through the mobile application and the website.
Yeah. My only suggestion with the 311, because I do it a lot, and then they tell you, take down the tracking number, and sometimes I'm on the phone, I can't write down the tracking number. So I wish there was a way that the 311 office could get back to the constituents and say, listen, your request has been solved, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
That's something our new CRM system can hopefully let us implement.
great. I'm curious about the Boston permits and licenses and how's that going and how's that working?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a project that's been ongoing since August of 2014. It was the very early stages of launching this, and really the goal was to recognize that getting building permits is a challenge, and it's a challenge for many reasons. Some of which have to do with policy, some of which has to do with process. But we have done historically, I think we've not done the best possible job of delivering people easy-to-use technology when they do go online to apply for a permit, to track the status of their permit, to find out even what permits they'll need for a given type of project. So this permitting project was launched in 2014 to improve that experience. We held a hackathon in August of 2014 that led to the launch of some small improvements, a permit tracker, a better tool for looking up addresses online. And then last fall, we launched the beta of permits.boston.gov, which is a brand new interface for actually applying for permits. And that went live officially earlier this calendar year. There's a lot of feature benefits that come along with this, but essentially this product was built by actually talking with the people who use it and understanding their needs. So one example, previously, we had organized, each permit could only have a single person who could access its information. So if you were an electrician working on a project, you could look up the electrical permit that you applied to, but it wasn't visible to anybody else. Now, you can register yourself as an electrician as part of a larger project, and the general contractor on that project can have access to all of the permits related to that project, electrical, plumbing, other things. The homeowner, if it's a home construction project, can also be a part of that project and have access to all of the permits. So we're trying to build tools that align with the way people actually work, the way they need to share information. We're trying to make sure that they work well on mobile devices, that they are friendly and easy to use, and don't add to the already challenging process of going through permit approval.
So I'm curious about the feedback, if any, from the users.
Yeah, it's been very positive.
As I some,
You've heard some not so.
yeah.
Well, we'd love to chat and hear what you're hearing so that we can make
And
changes.
not a lot. I mean, just
Yep.
pool permit that's taking months.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I like this online moving truck permits.
Mhm.
I think that's great. But something I wish you could look at is particularly in some of the downtown neighborhoods, there's a lot of people that move in and move out, particularly students. So if I live in the North End and I park my car on Salem Street, I have no idea that, because sometimes I'll keep my car there for a whole week. So I have no idea that there's a permit for that address. So I wish there was an app, so if you live in the North End or the downtown neighborhoods, that you could get an app to let you know when there's a special permit that's been taken out and the address, if it's on your street or whatever.
It's a great idea.
You know what I mean? Just something like that. I think it will work out. And finally, Boston Fire Department response time analysis. Can you just talk a little about that? Can you explain where we were from before?
I don't have the details of the analysis in front of me. I know that we worked to measure and map response time throughout the city. This was at the request of the fire department, just to help them visualize the changes that have happened to response time as various traffic and growth patterns have changed in the city. But I don't actually know off the top of my head the substance of that analysis.
Yeah. What else do I have? Oh, that 311 app.
Yeah.
So sometimes it gets a little confusing with the map because you have to get the location.
Mhm.
And like I find myself like in Cambridge sometimes just trying to put my location in there. So I wish you could work something, make it a little easier for some of the folks that use it.
We did push an update, I believe, several weeks ago that allows you to type in the address instead of just
You do
using
that?
the map.
Okay.
If it's not live now, it will be very soon. So I've heard that feedback from a few folks,
Yeah.
and we're always tweaking and evolving these tools to make them a little easier to use.
Well, I appreciate the work that your department is doing. It's been very helpful, not only for the city council, but for the people that live in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Appreciate it.
Council Matt O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, our colleagues, thank you for the great work that you do. Josh, I've been impressed with your time in this position, and I think you and I share the belief that technology can be used to better deliver constituent services. Let me also begin by thanking your colleagues with you today and your incredibly talented team. The help desk has helped all of us, and Diana Orthman in your office has been a great resource for our office as well. So as we talk about better delivering constituent services, I'm hopeful that you can help me with a constituent service problem that propped up on Friday. Broadlawn Park is a condominium development in West Roxbury. It's 250 units. It's located on the street at number 55 Broadlawn Park, which is Chestnut Hill, Boston, 02467. 02467, I believe, is the only zip code that's shared among three municipalities, Brookline, Boston, and Newton. They started a campaign in their building after a owners association meeting to go on the FiOS website and put their address in to make sure they'll have access. They are told that they are not under the purview. They're Boston taxpayers, they're Boston residents. I know West Roxbury is slated in the first wave of build-out. Will they be included even though they live in a zip code which is not recognized?
They will. So this was brought to my attention late on Friday night, and
Because I told them to call you.
Indeed. Yesterday morning, we sat down with Verizon for a regular meeting. We brought this to their attention. They investigated this yesterday, determined that, as we all know, yes, in fact, Broadlawn Park is part of the city of Boston, and as of this morning, they added roughly 1,000 households to
Right.
the eligibility criteria for sign-up. So those people should be able to go online now and register their interest in FIOS.
That is great, and I appreciate that. That was one building, but as you said, there are several streets. I mean, it's crazy. There are houses that are literally straddle the property line and pay property taxes, both Brookline and Boston. And then send their, Councilor Siamo is the same thing, I'm sure. Let's talk a little bit about CRM. I am a huge proponent of 311. Every time I'm at a house party or an event, I will offer a tutorial for residents on how to use it. It is so great. Not only does it demand accountability for us to our bosses, the constituents, but also creates a good paper trail. One thing that I would like to see, and I know it's been talked about before, is allowing the council offices to have access to some portion of it. I'm not, although the more the better, but allowing us to help you guys better do your job, because it is very frequently where there'll be a pothole or street light or some issue that the constituent will log it the right way, get a response that it's been dealt with or closed when there's no real reason for that. They call us. So are there any works to give counselors access to the CRM, and when can we expect that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this issue is come up before, and from several members of the council have brought it to our attention, and even within the various city departments that are often involved in solving an issue, there are issues that are not owned by a single department, and it's important to make sure that everyone who's involved in that solution stays connected to information about status and can do follow-up. And in particular, the council, in their incredibly important role of being that liaison for constituents, I think can benefit a great deal from this. So we are in the midst. Well, we have awarded a procurement for the new CRM system. In the RFP for that, we addressed this issue and the need to have the ability to. We've sort of likened it to the CC field in an email. That if a case is reported, that there may be multiple people who need to stay informed as that case progresses, including members of the council. So that was one of the features that we sought in the new platform. We're in contracting now with the vendor. We were going through a statement of work development. So this is very much on our radar. We're still in the early phase of the project. It's a little too early to give a timeline. But we would expect to roll out more capabilities along the lines of what you're talking about as part of the launch of this new CRM system.
That's
in
great.
the years
So the
ahead.
contract's been awarded. It's just sort of going over the language.
The RFP has been awarded. The contract has not
Is
been
being
completed
debated,
yet.
I
It's being
understand.
worked on
Well,
now.
that's great to hear, and as soon as we can make that happen, the better. So appreciate
Absolutely.
you guys on that. Let's talk a little bit about the Speed Bump app. I know it was in beta, I think, last year. Is it fully up and operating?
I actually would. I'm going to take a punt on that question because that's been generally managed out of the mayor's office of New Urban Mechanics. We have not done a lot with that app, and I'm not sure on the status of that.
Fair enough. Did you want to?
Yeah, I would defer to Nigel at that point,
Fair
just
enough.
because I've been far enough away from New York Mechanics for a few months to speak clearly on the matter.
Okay, that's great. Well, I think it's innovative and
a great
wonderful,
product,
and
yep.
look forward to seeing it successfully implemented. How about the trash collection app? That's you guys, right?
Yes, it is. Lauren, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm
to
happy to speak to that. So that is a system that we rolled out last year, about almost a year ago. And we've seen a lot of success. I think at this point we've had over 100,000 lookups for different addresses on that app, both online and then through the mobile app. So the reception has been very positive. We have a great liaison in Public Works. I think it's a great example of collaboration between multiple departments to make sure that we're pushing the right information out. I think one really positive test for us was through this last winter, being able to push alerts to users about changes in collection due to snow days.
Yep.
And so last year, for example, during those really heavy snowstorms, we needed to basically we had no way of targeting those residents in various neighborhoods. We had to simply put a big list on the website of the different neighborhoods that were affected by a snow day.
Mm-hmm.
This year, we were able to push very selected messages to people in those affected addresses about any changes to their collections. So, I think the reception was very positive to that. We didn't have the same complaints that we had on Twitter, certainly. So it's always a positive sign. So overall, it's been very positive.
Yeah, I think it's great. And this was a relatively mild winter, but I know last year there were days, several days, where we had a succession of Monday storms, which is my crash day, and they would end trash pickup halfway through a shift, so it led to a lot of confusion. I don't know if MEMA runs it. I assume they do the Mass Alert app, which I have, and it was used for used to be used sparingly. Now it seems, if it's windy, they send out, which is fine. The more information, the better. Do we have anything for either Homeland Security or sort of like a Boston alert system? in
Yeah.
place?
So right now we have a system called Alert Boston that the city OEM uses to push alerts to residents. We have many people signed up for that right now. I think we're close to 70,000 residents signed up to receive alerts. That platform is currently up for contract renewal, and so we're going through an RFP process to look at the different solutions out there because you're not the only person who doesn't doesn't use it. And that's because the sign up for it had been really clunky. We'd been limited in terms of how nimble the different messages we could send were, and then also we weren't able to use multiple languages. So all of those are really important considerations. And so our hope is that a new platform will allow us to better address constituents' needs and also change the format of those messages so that you're able to manage your alerts so that you don't have to receive the windy alerts if you're not don't feel affected by those. And make sure that you do get the important ones.
That's great. And then finally, I read an article, I think it was in Governing Magazine, about New York City using old payphones as Wi-Fi hotspots and charging stations. Any plans to sort of follow that lead? I know you've done a couple, and there's a wonderful solar-powered charging station, Jamaica Pond, which I frequently use. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's a great question, Counselor. And fortunately or unfortunately for us, we have very few payphones compared to New York. Most of the payphones, the sidewalk payphones in the city of Boston were removed years ago, and so we don't have that infrastructure to use. However, we are having conversations with Intersection, which is the company behind the Link NYC devices that I think you're referring to. Those are outdoor digital billboards, small scale, it's sort of like a 50-inch screen on each side showing advertising. That advertising funds a free Wi-Fi service at that location, as well as a tablet kiosk computer that can be used to make phone calls and look up information. I think it's something we as the city want to explore. There are some questions around the introduction of outdoor video advertisements in the city and on city streets, but we think there's potential, and it's something we want to engage with our constituents.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this is about offering a valued service at no cost to the taxpayer. In fact, could generate revenue for the city. So I will happily support those efforts, and if there's a way that I can be helpful, let me know. And thank you all. You're doing a great job. Very important
Counselor.
work you're doing, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been joined by Councilor Michael Flaherty, and I will now recognize Councilor Frank Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Yasha and your staff. Thank you for coming out. Just a couple quick questions. Can you talk about the relocation of the infrastructure a little bit? So is that going to a company so we're not going to rent a building and then have to go, so it's a place that does this, they'll keep everything up, and approximately what will that cost be?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been several phases to this. So the first phase of this was to, when I came into this job, the primary data center for the city of Boston was in the basement of this building, which for many reasons is a terrible place to have a primary data center. We had a small presence at a facility run by a company called the Markley Group, which is downtown, right in downtown Crossing. Actually, they have it's one of the top tier data centers in the Boston area. It sits above Macy's, believe it or not, and they have been operating. We had a small presence there for a little bit of equipment. What we did is we expanded our footprint there by renting additional space inside that facility. We moved much of the equipment that was in the basement of this building to that facility to make it our primary facility, and we turned the City Hall data center into our secondary or our backup location. The second phase of this project, which is part of what's funded through the FY17 capital program, is to relocate the secondary location, the backup location that's in this building, to another facility. it will be a similar type of arrangement. We're actually in the process we have an RFP in the field right now where we will rent a certain amount of space from a third-party facility. We will place our equipment in that space. We own the equipment. We do not own the building. Typically, with these kinds of providers, they're called co-location companies. They maintain responsibility for a certain set of things: power, cooling, physical security. You, as the customer, maintain responsibility for placing the equipment there and making sure that the equipment itself is running. So city staff will continue to actually run the equipment itself, but they will be doing it in a facility owned by a third party.
Okay, and so how much, so will all the space that's freed up downstairs, will that be for you guys, or is that just on the open market?
I think
The
that's
open city market?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's I don't know what the market is like for windowless basements in the concrete buildings, but it will eventually be freed up for use by the city. It will take some time to move everything out. There's also things in the basement downstairs that we're not going to move, but instead we're going to replace the systems themselves. So, for example, our property tax collection system runs on a 30-year-old COBOL-based mainframe, a piece of technology for which we would be very unlikely to be able to buy parts if it were to break. Starting at the beginning of FY17 on July 1st, the first round of property tax bills will go out to a new modern system that runs on modern
And then you'll
infrastructure.
transition over.
Exactly. So there's a few other pieces like that over the course of the next year, we're going to wind down operations in the basement. And at that point, it will be up to property management to figure out how to best use the space.
Okay, and do you guys get involved in, like, so regular offices say like their purchase or their lease of, you do just computers, would you ever get into, like their copying and their print? Do you get involved in any of that?
Somewhat. So today what we do is we provide print standards for the city. So we release recommended equipment that departments can purchase for doing their printing. We are exploring the idea of what's known as managed print, which is where a third party is brought in, not just to actually help run the printing infrastructure. When something breaks, they're automatically notified. They come, they can fix it. We have to look at the cost of that.
So manage not the actual printing, but manage the machines.
Exactly.
Okay, I would suggest that you go over to the police headquarters and talk with Greg Mahoney over there and look at his operation over there.
Great.
Mobile devices, can we talk about those a little bit? Are we using our buying power when it comes to mobile devices, pads, and so I know the police department's using them. You had talked about ISD. So do those departments, are they on their own when it comes to buying and if they're leasing, or maybe should those purchases come through you?
Yeah.
So it's a one department purchasing, and then we would get the best bang for our buck. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So there are certain purchases that are made that are very specific to a particular department. So especially with our public safety agencies, there are times in which they can buy a standard tablet or computer. There are also cases where they need hardware that's very particular to the public safety function. But when they are buying standard equipment, most often that's purchased through a statewide purchasing contract. So Mass IT negotiates on behalf of the state and of the Commonwealth and cities and towns favorable pricing for a variety of technology services and products. We, as a city within the Commonwealth, are able to leverage that contract, which will typically have some bulk buying power, quite a bit of bulk buying power already baked into it to make purchases. One of the decisions that we make, and Eddie is heavily involved, he's actually on an advisory committee for one of those state contracts. One of the decisions we have to make when we go to market is whether we think we can get a better deal as the city of Boston going out to RFP.
Having more buying power than Rehoboth.
Right, exactly, versus using the state contract. And so there are times when we leverage those contracts and times when we will go out to RFP even though we could buy off of the state contract.
So to bring it back a little bit, are you able to purchase for ISD, but you're not necessarily able to purchase for the police and fire?
We would be able to purchase for anyone, and we do regularly assist other departments with their technology purchasing. We do not have a policy in place that says that if you're buying a mobile, a tablet, that it has to come through Do It. But we do a lot of work to establish standards and to provide guidance and support, which means that both to the departments as well as to the purchasing department, to make sure that things are being bought in a way that's responsible and cost effective.
Okay. And my last line of questioning, can you talk about the FiOS deal a little bit? Like, how is it going to phase into Boston? Where? What neighborhoods? And also, they're on strike now, and how is that going to affect this rollout here?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot in the deal, but the high level, Verizon has agreed to invest a minimum of $300 million to replace copper infrastructure across the city with fiber. They expect that the time frame for this replacement will be 5 to 6 years. It's going to start in West Roxbury, in the Dudley Square neighborhood of Roxbury, and in Dorchester, and will expand from there. I think they're generally looking to move from the southern parts of the city north. So we would expect to see Mattapan, Hyde Park, Jamaica Plain, Roslindale, some of those neighborhoods be in the next wave. Their original build schedule had the first round of neighborhoods actually getting service starting next year. As you mentioned, there's a strike happening right now, and at this point, we don't anticipate significant construction or even the kind of detailed planning work that has to happen to get going until that strike is resolved. So there's a kind of just pause button right
Good.
now.
So
on the build-out.
we are going to hold back and support those strikers.
Absolutely.
And I know that's not
yeah.
necessarily yours to answer,
Sure.
but that's what it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's a lot of benefits to consumers and a lot of benefits to residents and businesses in this deal. It's also a benefit to workers in the city of Boston who will have the chance to build a network, a fiber network in the city that they call home, and we think it's important that it be the union Verizon workers that do the work to actually make this possible.
Good. And what was the original timeline before the strike happened? Like when was the plan to start the work, to start the infrastructure improvements?
Yeah, so they were expecting to have shovels in the ground this summer, and the first neighborhood's coming online early next year. It's possible that the strike can be resolved soon. It may not be, but hopefully there'll be a contract in place and work can commence quickly.
Good. Thank you.
Thank
you for your time.
Thank you. Councilor Jackson?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. One, I am very, very happy to hear that if Sandy were to occur, we will actually be able to collect tax revenue. I always thought the two data centers that we had, and I love the city of Boston, but in your world, it's not so good to do the rah-rah under sea level Boston thing, because obviously that doesn't give us the resilience that we need. And we saw this, I think it was 2012, when there was a electrical transformer on Boylston Street, where the conveniently located redundant transformer was right next to it. And when the first one blew up, it actually took out the redundancy. And so very happy to hear that. I guess I wanted to hear the time frame of the secondary move. Obviously, those data centers, the one downtown, would not encourage anyone to try to get in there because really bad things will happen to you when you try to go to those places. But can you give us a feel around when that secondary piece, and will it be someplace further away from the city, or?
Yeah, it will. So there's an RFP in the field right now for procuring the backup facility. Our expected timeline is that we will award between now and likely the beginning of the fiscal year. We can't actually spend the money until the new fiscal year and the approval of the budget, but we would expect to start at the very beginning of FY17 the work of implementing and migrating those servers and to complete the bulk of the work within the fiscal year.
Yeah, I guess from a broad perspective, you came in to probably the most antiquated aspect of of the city government when you guys got the keys. I'm sure Council Siomo and Flaherty might have known a little bit about COBOL. Y'all probably programming in COBOL back in the
See, when I started.
I did not have that great opportunity to program in COBOL. But I guess from a 21st century city side of things, can you kind of speak through on a broad level, what does planning look like for the IT infrastructure for the city of tomorrow? How are we working in that space to be ahead of the game? Back when COBOL was around, it might have seemed like a one-off process piece, but you're just as much infrastructure as roads, rails, and bridges, and lights, and phones now. So from a kind of big, high level, how do we coordinate for a 21st century approach?
Yeah, it's a great question, Counselor. I appreciate you asking it. I will say, though, that I was in Seattle for the last part of last week, meeting with a group of other large city CIOs, and Boston is far from the most antiquated city in terms of our technology infrastructure. Hearing some of the stories from other cities only reminded me yet again of how grateful I am to my predecessor, Bill Oates, and to the great team at Do It for the work that they've done to make tremendous progress on modernization. We still have work to do. But it's my hope that within the next year that we will have eliminated all of the major applications running on mainframe environments, and that alone is an accomplishment that few cities will be able to claim. In terms of our broader strategy for this, I think there are things that I would put in the bucket of bringing us into the first decade of the 21st century, and most of those are well underway, removing these mainframe environments. Many of those were done by my predecessor. There's much more that we've taken on as well. But the question about how we prepare for the future, I think, is a great one. And a couple of things I would say to that. First, the future is much more networked. More than ever, we are relying on services and technologies that depend on having reliable, fast internet connectivity to work. We use email that's hosted by companies like Google and Microsoft, where we don't even own the servers. They're in a data center somewhere. We don't even know where they physically are located, but we purchase a service and they operate it on our behalf. For those types of cloud-based services to work, we need to have highly reliable networks and make sure that at no point do people lose connectivity when they're, whether they're mobile, whether they're in a city building. We're also thinking long-term that the city will, if we look out a decade, the city should not have necessarily as many or even any data centers in the way that we know them today. Much more companies are starting to rely on infrastructure that's rented from large providers like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Instead of buying a server, you rent the server by the hour. And if you need a bigger server, you press a button and sort of magically a larger server is made available, your hourly rate goes up, and your software continues to run on that new larger server. This is the direction that most large technology companies are going. Netflix, for example, does not own a single server. They're the largest provider of traffic on the internet, and yet they don't own any of that physical infrastructure. They rent almost all of it from Amazon and other cloud providers as needed. So we think, as we look down the future, that's a direction that the city we're starting to explore that model. We're also doing more with what's known as software as a service. This is the idea that instead of us buying a piece of software and installing it somewhere and then running it ourselves, that we simply purchase a service. So our new 311 system will be built on top of Salesforce, which is a software as a service platform. Again, similar to that idea of not owning servers, not only do you not own the servers, you don't even own the software or have the responsibility for managing writing the code or managing the application itself. You simply get a set of features. Those features are regularly updated and improved, and you focus on using those features to solve whatever the business challenges of your organization. So we're relying more on software as a service. And lastly, we're really thinking about modern development practice when we do build things. Our website, I think, is a fantastic example of this. The old model of building technology was to write a giant RFP. You talk to some customers, you'd write a 300-page document, you'd go out to market, you'd come back, and 3 or 5 years later, maybe you'd have a product, and probably by that time it was out of date. And what we've seen in government IT is that approach to developing technology has been a failure. It has been a failure at the federal level. We saw this with healthcare.gov. It's been a failure at the state level. We've seen this with the exchange. We've seen this with the RMV modernization. We've seen this with DCF technology upgrades. So we are trying to take modern development practice, which involves building things in smaller chunks, having more user feedback, being iterative in how we approach things. Pilot.boston.gov is a great example of this. We didn't go off in a room somewhere by ourselves and build a website for 2 years and come back and say, here's the website. Instead, we interacted with customers at the outset. We launched a small trial version of it. We've captured feedback from people. We've gotten to hear more about their priorities, what they like, what they don't like. And every day we integrate that feedback so that when we do flip the switch, what we'll have is something that's been tested in the public light, something that has incorporated the feedback and the lessons that we can learn from that kind of engaged iterative process. And that's really the model that we hope to adopt across city technology implementations.
And that sounds a lot more efficient, effective, and cheaper.
Yep.
Because if Netflix is not purchasing, and we love EMC and those folks up there, but if they're not buying them, then we probably shouldn't be buying them either. I guess the piece that we've talked about before, and I wanted to hear how this happens as city councilors. We get number 553388 spit at us and our staff for whatever issue comes out. We don't have a graphical interface to be able to understand what that means and for us to be able to track it. Can you give us a time frame on us having essentially city council portal to be able to do constituency services? Most of us are doing it on Google and we don't have a real CRM platform when we do our best. And then the other component is Councilor Flaherty is an at-large councilor, and we're both district councilors. So the person could call, and this happens all the time. Because we're friends, we can kind of pick up the phone and say, hey, this is one of the things that's going on. What's going on in your district, or have you heard this? But there's a redundancy that is based on not having the ability to put the same information into the same system that makes it difficult for us. And I'll also let you know during the snow time, it's horrible, right? Because what we're doing, honestly, is they're going to call us. We're going to call the yard, right? We're going to call our friend at the yard, and they probably have called Councilor Flaherty and I for my district. And so the poor people at the yard have that, and then they also have whatever tracking sheet. So just from the council side of things, and our staffs that also do a lot of this work. Where are we relative to that level of connectivity and our ability? This is with approvals. We're all doing a whole lot of stuff relative, and John Barrows is all billions of dollars in development, letters that are coming across our desk, things that we have to approve. All of those touches to be able to be in one place. So where are we at relative to that?
Absolutely, and it's a great question, and I think there's a couple elements to it. So when it comes to the 311 type service request, as I mentioned earlier, we are in the midst of implementing a new 311 technology platform. One of the things that we have incorporated into the procurement for that platform is the ability to note on any issue sort of other interested parties, and that could be a counselor or a council office, that could be another department that received an inquiry and perhaps passed it on to a more appropriate department, but still wants to stay connected so they can follow up. So that's something that we'll be looking at implementing as a feature within the new CRM system. It may not be a full-fledged CRM tool for the council, but what we don't want is the scenario that you just described, where the same issue is being reported to the people doing the work through 3 different tickets in the CRM system and 2 different phone calls from 2 different people, that overwhelms them. It reduces their capacity to actually deliver services. One of the other elements of that is better data management within the CRM so that we can identify when there's a duplicate issue that was perhaps reported by multiple constituents or by the same constituent through multiple channels. How can we merge those together so that from the perspective of the person doing the work, they get one ticket, they go, they resolve it, and it notifies all of the parties who were involved in serving that constituent's need and inquiry. So that's something that we're hoping to build out as part of the new CRM system. As always, we appreciate the council's promotion of 311, both the phone number and the Boss 311 mobile app. Certainly, that is the easiest and fastest way to get your issue in front of the department that will resolve it, and we do a great deal to track performance of teams and departments to make sure that they are responsive to those requests.
And I guess lastly, will there come a time where we have some type of innovation lab? I know that, so my thought is the people who are closest to the problems are the folks who are most likely to have an answer. The folks downstairs at the desk who collect my money for my parking tickets are probably the people who are the best around how to optimize. And just from a management flow of that information, I feel like a lot of times implementations kind of happen from on high and don't necessarily happen at that level. And I guess even from the council side, is there an opportunity that there's kind of a city government-wide project or innovation either committee or way to vet potential projects? Because I have a feeling that a lot of the folks who, in particular, people who are administrative staff who've been here a really long time, the people who all of us actually ask when we get these new jobs, and we have no idea what's going on. Those individuals are really valuable in terms of the information that they have, and we don't really capture the process components around that. Is there an opportunity in the future to have that? And I know you've done it for the mayor's office in terms of the projects on that side, but are there kind of more global and even more egalitarian ways to do that that would actually allow for process improvement?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think you could not agree more that involving the people who do the work, who understand the intricacies of it, is absolutely essential to building things that are actually useful and have the positive impact that we're hoping to have. I would say 2 things. One is the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics is in many ways an innovation lab, and they work not just with initiatives that are tied to the mayor's office, but they work to support departments around the city in bringing new technologies to bear in ways that are valuable to constituents. So, for example, the ability to pay for parking through your mobile phone was a collaboration between the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics and the Boston Transportation Department, and really
and the council.
And the council.
Don't leave us
Fair
out.
enough. So I think we have groups of people who are focused on that, especially with Monum. For us in the Department of Innovation and Technology, we are trying to bake that way of working into everything that we do, so that we are not coming in and saying, hey, we're the technology guys, we know how this works, just listen to us, right? But instead that we're sitting down, that we're taking time to understand the intricacies of how departments work and get that feedback that's on the ground. I mentioned in my opening remarks a map that we built with the fire department to help them access data to keep firefighters safe during a call. That was an idea that came out of somebody who sits in the fire alarm dispatch center, who is scratching his head going, wait a second, the city has all this information, but it's not available to the dispatchers. So he built something himself by manually putting dots on a Google map with all the information. And then he, in our conversations with him and saying, how can we help you? He said, well, maybe you could build something that's automatic, that captures more information that would be relevant to us, knowing when there's been a code violation in a building, for example, so that that's information that the firefighters have before they go into that building. That was the idea from Fire Alarm, and it was built by us placing Do-It team members in Fire Alarm, working with them. We built 8 different prototypes of that and brought it to the team and said, what do you think about this? And they'd say, that's good, but if it's going to be useful to us, here's some things we've got to change. So this is how we're trying to develop our whole work methodology to be open and responsive to all that insight that exists on the part of the people who do the work every day.
And again, kudos to you and your team for that. That's the cross-silo work that actually helps government do its job. And also, big data, as we saw from Amazon, can sometimes make you a big dummy if there's not people actually working together on that. The last thing I would say is, and I believe that you need and deserve the changes in terms of 2.35% on the external budget, the 9.71% on the capital side, and I believe that those will realize some operational efficiencies. I hope that the administration, as noted here, you see that there are needs. I would hope that the administration also sees those needs in the Boston Public Schools and adjusts the school budgets upward in a way that actually accommodates the young people who are there, instead of the budget now that will really, I believe, decimate a lot of the great work that's happening there. Kudos to the work that you continue to do, and look forward to all of the great things that are coming out of your department. Thank you.
Thank you for your support, Counselor.
So much.
Councilor
You got any more
Flaherty.
last things? Well done.
Listen, I used to be in technology. I had another job before this, brother. I can talk this talk.
By the way, I got an incomplete in COBOL. That was terrible.
That's that song.
We won't ask you to fix the mainframe.
This is Teacher Appreciation Week, so you're incomplete. They probably should have given you another grade.
It's long gone. Go ahead.
Thank
Councilor
you.
Flaherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yasha, we can pick up with access to the server. You had mentioned access to the server prior to your arrival in the previous administration, under the Menino administration. High-level officials had access to the server where they had the ability to double delete and to scrub the server. There's a big case involving the Secretary of State and the courts and what have you. So who has access to the server now, and how can we prevent, because what happened, again, prior to your arrival, tens of thousands of public documents were destroyed. And in some of those emails with threats and bullying and intimidation, they actually had a naughty list. They maintained a naughty list of who was subservient to the administration, who wasn't. I could write a book about it. It was chaos. But they had access to the server, and so someone was able to double delete and to scrub the server. Please tell me in 2016 that that's not capable of happening. And what protocols and what safeguards are there to make sure that no one in the administration, no one's above the law, no one has the ability to go in and single-handedly double delete public documents, and I'm talking tens of thousands of public documents were destroyed, never to be recovered. Your predecessor was involved in it. It didn't involve you. It didn't involve this administration. But quite frankly, when I'm looking at this budget, I need the assurances that that can't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do all of our email retention as part of our Google contract, our Google Apps deployment. So when the city switched to Google away from Microsoft-based platforms.
And that conveniently happened when the new administration started, correct?
Just before. So it was, I believe in fall of 2013.
So we had 20 years we were stuck in a time warp, and then all of a sudden now, as a new administration's transitioning, we decide to get new stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. As you said before I arrived here, the way that we do document retention for Google, there's a product called Google Vault, which is part of their larger suite. Any email that is sent through the city's systems, any document that's created through Google Docs, any calendar entry that's created, all of those are saved into the Google Vault. This is a repository of information. If, let's say I was to send an email and say, I wish that wasn't part of the public record, I delete it from my inbox, that email remains in the vault. It may disappear from my inbox, but if a public records request or a subpoena was received, we would be able to search through the vault and serve that request by pulling up that email. This is our primary method of ensuring that there is integrity to the document retention process is through use of the vault. We have a very limited number of Do-It employees who have the ability to search the vault, and all of the activity related to the vault is audited in a way that is not deletable by anyone. So were somebody to search the vault, were somebody to download email, were somebody to attempt to remove something from it, all of that would be tracked and all of that would be recoverable through a records request and using the tools available. So this is a very tightly controlled group that has access and one that's very closely monitored.
So it's all foyerable.
Yes.
And did you ask yourself the question, why did it take Boston so long? Or maybe what were they hiding, or what were they up to? I mean, that's what it seems like to me. We have an outgoing administration, and all of a sudden we're going to usher in like new technology when in fact the matter is we should have had this stuff a long time ago.
Well, I think the specific technology that they chose was something that only became available and commercially viable in the final few years of the last administration. I can't speak to anything that was done on the old technology platform other than to say that we have retained copies of everything that was in place when this administration arrived. Those copies there's multiple copies of all of the old Microsoft, the Outlook data, and that is available as well for us to search and do document production from. That is also very tightly controlled in terms of who has access to search or who might have any modification privilege.
Gotcha. Talk a little bit about, I know that Do-It is responsible when people pay their tickets. Are you guys involved with the apps with the meters when people want to pay their apps?
Generally,
pay the meters from their app, I should say.
Generally, no. The meter app is the Park Boston app was procured by Boston Transportation Department with support from the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics. We were involved a little bit in the PayTix app, which is the app you can use when you don't pay your meter and you get a ticket.
Gotcha.
Our role, my department's role, was our digital team who redesigned the user interface for that app to make it more attractive and usable and consistent with our visual identity that we're using on the new website.
And I saw that you did the PayTix. I just didn't know whether or not you were on the front end of it with respect to the meters. We have a significant handicap parking fraud and abuse scam that goes on where people are using the placards to take a free space. They're not paying the meter. And the solution there is just to have the folks with the legitimate disabilities pay the meter just like everybody else so they'll be treated the same way. And that would eliminate probably 90% of the fraud and the abuse. And as we're starting to see more development in the downtown, the next one's going to be the government center garage. There's going to be 1,000+ cars that will be displaced. Everyone will miraculously all of a sudden go to their doctor and be handicapped, and they'll be parking in spots, not paying the meter, which is beyond offensive. It's offensive enough that someone that truly needs the placard in the space is not getting it because some able-bodied person is trying to find a way to find a parking spot close to their work. But on top of that, they don't even feed the meter, so the city's actually losing out on the revenue. Tens of millions of dollars we lose because we haven't been able to figure out how to solve this problem. Very solvable. You just allow everyone has to be treated the same way. Everyone feeds the meter. And the minute that everyone feeds the meter, they realize that they're going to have to take public transportation or carpool. The scam is up because they're not going to be able to use that placard. They use the placard for the simple reason is they don't have to pay the meter. However, that made sense at a time when particularly folks that have dexterity issues and they couldn't feed the meter. But now because you can do everything by app and everyone has an iPad or an iPhone, so a very solvable problem. Not sure what's taking so long between a Disabilities Commission, the city, our mayor's office, the transportation department, but we get scammed out of tens of millions of dollars of very precious revenue because we can't solve that problem. So if there's anything that you can lend with respect to your expertise from Do-It as to how we can kind of close that gap, that would be tremendous. Also want to talk to you a little bit about the Verizon Fios and the decisions about which neighborhoods. One would argue that where most of the development is happening, those streets are open, those sidewalks are open. That's the opportunity to get that that infrastructure in the ground. What I'm forecasting here is that we're sort of going about it the wrong way. That areas where there's tremendous amount of shovels in the ground, cranes, construction truck. So we're allowing those permits. We're putting those neighborhoods sort of under siege, if you will, with that construction development. We're not allowing Fios to go in at that point, only to have those streets and sidewalks have to be dug up at some point down the road when they do put the infrastructure in. So I'm not quite sure if it was your analysis or someone else's analysis that went into where do we start. We should be starting where the majority of the construction's happening, where the streets and the sidewalks and the trucks and the cranes are, and then going out from that point. We're going the other way around. We're going to have brand-new streets, brand-new sidewalks, only to be dug up. It's just counterintuitive. So if you can explain sort of the theory behind why we're starting sort of out in the suburban southwest corridors of the city and not in where the epicenter is, and then go out from there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. So some of the decision about where to build is Verizon's, and based on their availability of existing infrastructure, they have Fios service in Dedham, and extending that into West Roxbury is a lighter technical lift for them than going
Makes
to, say, Alston Brighton, where they don't have any adjacent services. We've talked to them about this issue of digging and disruption, and our goal to minimize the impact that any construction work has on residents. I think they are opportunistically, as new projects take place, they are putting in place either actual fiber optic cables or the underground infrastructure that they will need to provide fiber optic service.
But just not connecting it.
Exactly. And actually, in a few cases, there are some new construction buildings in the Seaport, for example, where they have actually connected it, and they are offering internet service in some of these new buildings because they said, we're already here, the ground is open, let's put some cables there. What they've communicated to us, however, is that their goal is to follow as much as possible the path of existing copper cable. So Verizon has a great deal of existing infrastructure in the city, most of it copper, but some of it actually fiber optic as well. And they want to reuse the conduit, the pole attachments that they already have today for their copper footprint, and they want to minimize the amount of digging that they do. So instead of tearing up a street, their hope is to be able to pop a manhole and snake a new fiber cable through it rather than have to rebuild the whole infrastructure. It's certainly, from them, it's a very simple business decision. It's very expensive to tear up streets. And certainly from the perspective of the city, it's disruptive to residents. So we're encouraging them to follow that model of utilizing existing paths, minimizing digging. We've also agreed as part of this deal to do an expedited permitting review process, which will allow them to work rather than thinking street by street or pole by pole. They instead can think about blocks and sections of neighborhoods. So they can put together a plan that involves all the digging they will need to do, all of the traffic disruption that they will need. They can present it to the city as a cohesive plan of this is the order in which we're going to go through this section of a neighborhood. Here's how we're going to minimize the traffic disruption. And so that we will have, as the city, the big picture to be able to say, actually, the way you've done this, you're going to completely disrupt the flow of vehicles through the neighborhood for a week. What if you, worked here and here instead of, these two adjacent locations at the same time? We can be a part of that conversation with them about neighborhood-wide traffic management to try to mitigate disruption.
That's great. I appreciate that. Mr. Chair.
Just to piggyback on that, I think when we had the hearing on Fios, when they weren't interested in coming, we talked about the city has fiber throughout the city through the traffic management system, et cetera. Do we have that mapped?
We do, actually. It's not that we did not when we had that hearing, but we've been working over the past 6 months to map all of that infrastructure. Where we have conduit, where we have existing fiber cables, where we have rights to use somebody else's asset. We have a draft version of that map, and where it's undergoing some quality checks right now. But we have a pretty good picture of where that is. It's certainly a lot of assets and is likely to be very valuable for the city as we seek to connect more city buildings to a network. Getting to the point of where that can directly benefit residents in terms of their home access is another big step. But if nothing else, we hope that the availability of that information will increase the likelihood that commercial providers who are building in the city will choose to lease a city-owned asset rather than build a new conduit in the ground.
And will prevent a lot of digging possibly, right?
That's the hope.
Right.
That is the hope.
Right.
And just through Mr. Chair, do we get user fees or do we tax these guys, or how's that worked? Is it I assume we're generating some revenue from usage and.
We should. The model, the rental model that's put in place, which has been in place for several decades, is not well optimized to maximize revenue or minimize digging. We have a cost recovery model that does not quite take into account depreciation of the value of an asset over time. And so what we've seen in several extreme examples of companies have come to us and said, you have conduit where we need to go. We'd like to rent it. We say, okay, here's what it will cost you. And they say, wait a second, that's more than it will cost me to build a new conduit myself. And then they go and tear up the streets again. That's obviously not a good way to manage this as an asset. So as we've started the process by mapping to understand what we have. And I think there's a lot of interest in looking at the rental process to make sure that we have something that can be both revenue positive for the city, but also make business sense for the companies that might want to take advantage of this asset.
And you mentioned earlier, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That, for example, West Roxbury is probably one of the first towns on the list, or communities on the list to get FiOS. So Alston Brighton being surrounded by Brookline, Watertown, Newton, none of them have FiOS?
I believe there are parts of Newton that have FiOS. I don't believe that either Brookline or Watertown has it, but I'm not 100% certain of
I know
that.
Waltham does, but again, we don't directly abut them.
Yeah.
Cambridge, we abut them as well. Just if you could let me know that,
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
because I know a lot of people in the Alston Brighton neighborhood are excited about, the potential for another provider. I think I mentioned I have RCN. I'm perfectly happy with them. If their prices come down as a result of this, I'd probably stay with them. But we seem to be last on the list, and just wondering if there's any alternatives.
So what I'd say is that in conversations with Verizon, I think the first half of the list is reasonably well set in terms of the neighborhoods in the southern part of the city. The second half of the list is very much up in the air right now. So whether, once they're through the southern neighborhoods, whether they start in Alston Brighton, whether they start in East Boston, whether they go downtown, all of that is really a question mark for them. So what Verizon, as they've communicated to us, their goal is to gauge interest in every neighborhood and to use the level of interest to help them prioritize their build out.
Right.
So certainly anyone in any neighborhood can go online today and put in their zip code and say, I'm interested in this. And for residents of Alston Brighton, that is a way to tell Verizon about that.
Right.
I think we certainly will continue to work with them to get, they are learning too. In this process, and they don't have a perfect sense of what it will cost or what obstacles they may run into or challenges they didn't anticipate. They haven't built in Boston before, as we well know.
Right.
And so as they learn, as they gauge customer interest, I think they'll make decisions about priority. And what they've said to us is, look, 5 to 6 years is what they're being conservative when they say that. They hope it will be faster, and hopefully they will find other places where there's an adjacency with the surrounding community or other opportunity to leverage existing infrastructure to get there faster.
And talking about the existing infrastructure, for example, I know that there's fiber probably running all the way from Oak Square almost through BU, at least I know of that because it's in my district. If that information helps them make that decision to choose our community first, they could use existing infrastructure like that, possibly.
In all likelihood, Verizon, because they have so much existing service footprint in Boston, they already have fiber cables that connect all of their central offices, for example. So they will have fiber today in Alston Brighton and in every neighborhood of the city. But it's not fiber going to people's homes. It's fiber running down main streets and into their central offices. If there's a large business that they're providing service to in the district, they probably have a fiber cable running to that business. So they're, I think, much less likely than any other provider would be to need the assets that the city has. In fact, they've expressed no interest in leasing those assets. They're going to look at their own existing assets and build off of that. But certainly, we will make available to them and everyone else information about what we do have and work to create a leasing model that makes it attractive for somebody.
Well, listen, thanks again.
Thank you very much,
Joshua,
gentlemen.
your team, everyone here today, and everybody behind the scenes and in various offices throughout the city. Want to thank you for all you do. And this concludes the FY17 budget review of the Do It department.